Gaming laptops are notorious for costing more than a desktop equivalent, but that may not be true in the near future. I imagine that eventually Nvidia will be marketing laptops with their new GTX 1080 and 1070 graphics cards, or at least M versions, meaning that models with a still very capable GTX 980 should become more affordable. But how about right now? Can you get a good deal on a gaming laptop? As a source of information, I will be using the price of my gaming laptop, the Asus ROG G7551JW. In a perfect world, I could just compare the price of the mobile parts and subtract that from the total cost of the laptop, but that isn't exactly possible. You see, mobile gaming parts aren't actually available to be bought by the consumer, so here's a list of similar desktop parts. The total cost of all these parts is $1,070.22 or 809.27 British pounds. For a while, this laptop would have been around $300 more than its desktop counterpart, but that has changed. I waited around 2 months for a sale, and the price dropped down to $1,000, meaning I paid less than if I had built a gaming desktop with similar parts. And that number isn't counting a case, because laptops require custom cases and it would have been impossible to find the equivalent, not to mention the cost of manufacturing. So I have technically saved $70.22 or 53.10 British pounds. Performance-wise, the GTX 970M is great for the average user. It definitely can't handle The Witcher 3 on Ultra and 12K, but it sure can run any game on high settings at 1080p while remaining at least 75 frames per second. Really, the only game that I've tried that runs closer to 45 frames per second on these settings is The Elder Scrolls Online. But games like Unturned can run at Ultra at 1080p while running at well over 60 frames per second. Minecraft, a more CPU-intensive game, runs anywhere from 200 to 90 frames per second, depending on how many entities are in the area. Counter-Strike Global Offensive runs anywhere from 200 frames per second to 500 frames per second, depending on texture detail. And Shrine runs flawlessly at 70 frames per second on Ultra at 1080p. As for video editing, the GTX 970M works great. Going from a GTX 450 and Core i3-2100 setup to a GTX 970M and Core i7-4720HQ setup has been a wonderful experience. Loading times are nearly 3 or 4 times as fast, like launching Windows or intensive apps like PowerDirector 14. I think this buy was completely worth the money. I strongly suggest you build your own desktop if you can, and only buy a gaming laptop if necessary. But really, times are changing. The PC master race is becoming more and more accessible with the RX 480, GTX 1060, and generally more competition. The PC industry is growing fast and stopping it is nowhere in sight. Call me arrogant, but PC gaming has been, still is, and probably will be for a very long time the best, cheapest, and most enjoyable way to play video games.